We've all been there sitting in front of an action film that seems to hit every beat just right. The gunfire, the brooding hero, the ruthless villain. And yet, something doesn't quite fit. The words don't match the lips. The emotion feels forced. The message gets muddy. You think it's just bad dubbing. But sometimes, it's something far more deliberate. What if the film you watched wasn't the film they intended to show you? Behind the slick editing and studio-approved trailers, there exists another version, the original, often raw, unfiltered, and quietly buried. In Hollywood, what's shot on set isn't always what arrives in theaters. Entire character arcs are reshaped. Dialogue is rewritten in the sound booth. Scenes are recut not for pacing, but for politics. Sometimes, the edits are obvious. Other times, they're invisible. And in the action genre, where adrenaline masks detail, these rewrites are often accepted without question. But for those who know where to look, the seams start to show. A protagonist suddenly sounds too heroic. A villain loses his motive. The tension collapses, and what's left is a shell of what could have been. In this list, we're peeling back the final cuts to reveal the hidden drafts. These are action films that were completely rewritten after they were supposedly finished, dialogue replaced, voiceovers swapped, themes diluted, and endings rewritten in silence. You may have watched them, but you've never really seen them. Let's uncover 15 action movies that were fundamentally altered after the cameras stopped rolling and discover what the studios never wanted us to hear. Fact 1. Chain of Command. 1994. In Chain of Command, Michael Dudikoff plays a soldier caught in the web of oil politics and betrayal. On paper, it's a standard early 90 seconds action plot. But listen closely to the villain and you'll hear something off. Not what he says, but how he says it. The film was originally wrapped with a fierce performance by the lead antagonist, who delivered impassioned political speeches and biting critiques of Western intervention. The tone was volatile, unapologetically bold. Too bold. After screening to nervous test audiences, the studio decided to take no chances. The villain's entire vocal track was discarded and replaced with a smoother, detached voice. The dialogue remained similar, but the fire, the edge, the identity, gone. The US release became a sanitized version of what had once been a brutal indictment. Meanwhile, international cuts slipped through with the original voice intact, offering a grittier, more dangerous narrative. Which version is official? That depends on where and when you watched. This wasn't just post-production tweaking, it was a silencing. Fact 2. Death Before Dishonor. 1987. Death Before Dishonor pitched itself as a celebration of military heroism, but buried beneath the explosions and flag-waving lies a scene that, in its original form, was meant to challenge the very ideals it seemed to uphold. A captured Marine delivers a haunting monologue, at least. That's what the script said. On set, the actor performed it raw. A speech full of disillusionment, calling out betrayal from within the ranks. But when the final film was released, that moment had been twisted. The mouth movement remained, but the words re-recorded. Now, the speech spoke of glory, courage, and never giving up. The bite was gone, replaced by patriotic polish. For those who can read lips, the mismatch is obvious. But to most, the illusion works flawlessly, until the original screenplay resurfaced and revealed what that character was really saying. Fact 3. The Patriot. 1986. In The Patriot, long before it became a title associated with another film entirely, Greg Henry played a scientist forced to stop a bioweapon catastrophe. His performance was cold, methodical, a man unraveling under pressure. Too cold, according to producers. In post-production, they made a shocking choice. Replace the actor's voice in the majority of scenes. Nearly 70% of Henry's lines were re-recorded by someone else, someone with a gruffer tone, a more conventional action hero presence. The lips still move the same, but the personality is gone. What remains is a mismatch, a man who looks emotionally restrained, yet sounds theatrically aggressive. Henry himself had no idea about the swap until the premiere. He sat in stunned silence, watching a performance that carried his face but not his voice. He left halfway through the screening. Sometimes, the most brutal edits don't cut footage. They cut identity. Fact 4. Diplomatic immunity. 1991. Diplomatic immunity delivers the kind of justice fantasy common in early 90 seconds action films. a grieving father taking the law into his own hands against the untouchable son of a diplomat. But the real deception isn't on screen, it's in the audio track. The villain, originally voiced with a heavy, identifiable European accent, came across as sharp, flamboyant, and undeniably threatening. His tone, layered with arrogance and venom, gave the story its most unsettling weight. But when the film was prepared for international release, concerns surfaced. The accent hit too close to real-world diplomatic sensitivities. So, without fanfare, the studio redubbed the entire character, opting for a more neutral, Americanized voice. What was once a chilling portrayal became forgettable. A character designed to provoke discomfort was smoothed into a generic antagonist. To make matters stranger, the actor wasn't informed. He discovered the change through a fan in Germany who asked why he sounded like someone else. When the voice of evil gets replaced, what happens to the meaning of justice? Fact 5. Joshua Tree, 1993. Joshua Tree, starring Dolph Lundgren, was supposed to be a grounded manhunt set against an unforgiving desert backdrop. The kind of film where silence does the heavy lifting, and physicality says more than words. But the producers thought otherwise. After test audiences found the character too silent, too emotionally closed off, the studio decided to fix it, not by adding scenes, but by adding thoughts. Entire internal monologues were written after editing and layered over existing footage. Lundgren didn't record those lines. Another voice did. The effect? The stoic, damaged outlaw became a poetic narrator, but the words didn't match his expressions. The story lost its edge and its authenticity. Critics sensed something artificial, a disconnect between soul and voice. And they were right. What was once a film about inner struggle became a film that told you how to feel, instead of letting you feel it. Fact 7. Delta Force 3, The Killing Game. The third installment of the Delta Force series, The Killing Game, was meant to inject fresh blood into a fading franchise. It introduced a new protagonist, a commander whose methods were brutal and motivations unclear. Originally, he was meant to disturb audiences, not inspire them. But that was before the voice changed. The role, played by Nick Cassavetes, was designed as a morally gray figure. His actions suggested discipline, but his tone in the original cut was cold, mechanical, almost sociopathic. The ambiguity was intentional, but when the studio viewed the early cut, nerves kicked in. The line between hero and villain had blurred too much. Fearing backlash, they redubbed many of the commander's lines with softened delivery and altered phrasing to reframe him as righteous. The transformation was subtle but surgical. The original voice hinted at control. The new one preached duty. Cassavetes later said, "They turned a complicated man into a cartoon soldier. In fixing what they feared was too real, they created something utterly false." Fact 8. Eye of the Eagle, 1987. At first glance, Eye of the Eagle is just another low-budget Vietnam War thriller, drenched in sweat, gunfire, and slow-motion deaths. But buried in its original form was a moment of startling honesty. One of the supporting characters, an AWOL soldier hiding in the jungle, had a monologue, not about courage, but about futility. He questioned the war, the orders, even the flag he once saluted. But that monologue didn't survive. Rather than cut the scene, producers chose a different tactic. They left the visuals intact and simply dubbed over the speech. The new voice offered generic lines about finishing the mission and honoring the fallen. It worked. Most audiences never noticed the lips didn't quite match. But in the original Filipino broadcast, the undubbed version aired complete with the unfiltered criticism. That broadcast has since become a rarity, passed among collectors like contraband. It's proof that sometimes silence isn't golden. It's imposed. Fact 9. American Samurai, 1992. American Samurai was supposed to be a brutal culture clash drama, an American orphan trained in Japan, battling identity and fate inside underground death matches. It had the foundation of something personal, even mythic, until it was rebranded through sound. Test audiences wanted blood, more action, less meaning. The studio listened, and in post-production, they cut large portions of dialogue and overdubbed the fight scenes with cartoonish aggression. Characters suddenly shouted things they never said. "Rip him apart! Finish him! Show no mercy!" Worse, many of these new lines were dubbed by anonymous voice actors with zero connection to the characters. The effect was jarring. A story that flirted with heritage and honor became a scream fest, void of subtlety. To those who saw the original, the contrast is stunning. One version aims for legacy, the other just for noise. Fact 10. The Peacekeeper, 1997. In The Peacekeeper, Dolph Lundgren portrays an Air Force officer racing to stop a nuclear disaster. Beneath the surface, the story hinted at deeper tensions about political misuse of power, military overreach, and blurred lines between duty and manipulation. Those elements didn't make it to the final cut. The original script featured extended conversations between top-ranking officials. They weren't about tactics, they were about morality. One scene had the president directly questioned about covert operations and global interference. That scene still exists, visually. But the entire audio was replaced, the dialogue rewritten into safe, almost sterile exchanges. What was once confrontation became conversation. Even the music was softened, removing urgency in favor of vague patriotism. To the casual viewer, it seems like a standard military thriller. But those who've read the leaked early script know the truth. The Peacekeeper once had something dangerous to say. Then it was muted. Fact 11. Rage, 1995. Rage begins with an everyman, an elementary school teacher who becomes the unwitting subject of a government experiment. Injected with a serum that triggers violent episodes, he descends into chaos. It's a tragedy wrapped in action tropes. But the original final scene didn't end with triumph, it ended in silence. The character, exhausted and broken, whispers a final line of despair as he walks away from the wreckage. No quips, no fireballs. Test audiences weren't satisfied. So the studio gave them what they wanted, a one-liner. They dubbed in a new voice, not even the actors, and added an explosion that didn't exist in the original shoot. The actor, Gary Daniels, reportedly watched the premiere in stunned silence. The emotional note he built the entire film around had been overwritten by a punchline. It was no longer about consequences. It was about ending on a boom. Fact 12. McBain, 1991. McBain, starring Christopher Walken, is the kind of film that feels like a fever dream. Guerrilla warfare, corporate corruption, rogue justice. It had a chance to say something, and at first, it did. Walken's final monologue in the original cut was brutal, a direct attack on U.S. foreign policy, complete with naming names and exposing tactics. His delivery was restrained, simmering with rage. It wasn't patriotic, it was accusatory. But that version never screened publicly. Instead, the scene was restructured in the editing room. Lines were moved, new ones were inserted through dubbing. The speech became abstract, almost poetic. Vague terms like freedom and the people replaced real indictments. What was once a call to awareness became a poster, quote. Interestingly, the trailer still contains fragments of the original speech lines never heard in the final release. Fans have spliced those moments together, trying to rebuild what was lost. But the real version? Still buried somewhere, waiting to be unmuted. Fact 13. Red Scorpion, 1988. At a glance, Red Scorpion seems like typical Cold War propaganda Dolph Lundgren, as a Soviet super soldier who switches sides after witnessing injustice. But the film we know isn't the one that was shot. The original performance by Lundgren was intentionally ambiguous. His transformation wasn't about sudden moral clarity, it was portrayed as confusion, emotional exhaustion, and slow detachment from ideology. There were long silences, minimal dialogue, and his motivations were deliberately unclear. That version didn't survive. After poor test screenings in U.S. markets, producers went into damage control. They rewrote key lines in post-production and re-recorded them, turning the stoic drifter into a vocal crusader for liberty. The subtle collapse of identity was replaced with sound bites like, "Freedom is the only way," and "I fight for what's right." The rebel leader's speeches were also altered. Originally nuanced, even cynical, they were scrubbed clean and redubbed to sound like action movie slogans. The result? A simple narrative where there was once complexity. What was meant to unsettle became something easy to cheer for. But cheering too soon often means the story got rewritten. Fact 14. Laser Mission, 1989. Laser Mission, starring Brandon Lee, was an attempt to fuse espionage, comedy, and romance into a compact VHS-friendly package. The pacing is fast, the tone feels erratic, and the central relationship? Strangely disconnected. That wasn't always the case. In the earliest assembly cut, Lee's character was emotionally tethered to his mission through his relationship with the female lead. There were quiet scenes, moments of hesitation, lines that revealed fear, guilt, even tenderness. Those scenes were cut. Not only that, the motivations in surviving scenes were redubbed entirely, including lines Brandon Lee never spoke. Several of these were patched in after Lee had wrapped filming. The voice lacks his inflection, his cadence. It doesn't sound like him, because it isn't. What was once a risky mission grounded in love became just another job done with a wink, and the man at the center of it lost behind a voice that didn't belong to him. Fact 15. The Octagon. 1980. The Octagon holds a unique place in action cinema history, not for its fight choreography or narrative, but for the unsettling whispers that follow Chuck Norris throughout the film. Echoing thoughts, ghostly narration, a peek into the character's mind. Except none of it was there during filming. The internal voiceover, now one of the film's most iconic elements, was a complete afterthought. Following a disastrous early screening where audiences found the story confusing and emotionless, the studio opted for a bold fix. Chuck Norris returned, but not for reshoots. He was brought in to record a full layer of inner monologue over already edited scenes. Those lines weren't in the script. They were created in the sound booth, on the fly, designed to add introspection where none was filmed. The result worked. The mood shifted. Critics praised the psychological depth, but what they saw wasn't depth. It was desperation. A narrative glued together by voices never meant to be heard. Fact 16. Strike Commando. 1988. Strike Commando 2 never claimed to be subtle. Its action was explosive, its humor loud, and its characters exaggerated to the edge of parody. But one character, Kramit, the over-the-top villain, crossed that line completely. Originally, Kramit spoke with a shrill, manic pitch, delivering lines with such theatrical flair that even the crew laughed between takes. It was meant to be bizarre, jarring, maybe even iconic. But the producers disagreed. Afraid the character had become a walking joke, they scrapped his voice completely and dubbed in a deeper, more menacing one. They also edited scenes to cut down his dialogue, hiding any obvious lip mismatches. The result? Kramit lost his identity. He was no longer absurd or terrifying, just generic. However, a few uncut copies made it into the Asian home video market, preserving the original madness. Fans who've seen both versions agree. The ridiculous one, for all its flaws, was unforgettable. Silence may be golden. But sometimes, the wrong voice is worse than no voice at all. Bonus fact, Phantom Soldier, 1987. It wasn't supposed to exist. Phantom Soldier, 1987, was released in Southeast Asia as a low-budget war thriller with supernatural undertones. A rogue soldier, a cursed mission, and whispers of a ghost haunting the battlefield. But what audiences got was only half the truth. According to production insiders, Phantom Soldier was originally shot as a psychological horror, one where the supernatural elements were deliberately left ambiguous. The ghost? A projection of PTSD. The violence? A metaphor. It was raw, uncomfortable, and unmarketable. So the studio made a call. Rebranded as action. Entire scenes were deleted. Others were overdubbed with cheesy, explanatory voiceover that suggested an actual spirit was behind the chaos. Ambiguity was erased. Every emotional breakdown became a ghost attack. What was once disturbing became absurd. Worse still, the original actor playing the lead suffered a real nervous breakdown during filming something briefly referenced in early cuts. That too was removed. Sanitized. The trauma on screen and off was hidden beneath explosions and dubbed groans. Few copies of the unaltered version remain. Rumors speak of a workprint reel held by a collector in Taiwan, featuring the lead character whispering lines like, "He's not real. I made him. I am him." That version never aired, never streamed. It's been kept in the shadows like the Phantom itself. Some stories are buried. Others are rewritten until they're no longer real. Fiction is crafted. But action films? Sometimes they're reconstructed entirely after the cameras go dark. So now you know. What we hear isn't always what was said. What we watch isn't always what was filmed. Which of these post-production rewrites surprised you the most? Have you ever watched a scene and sensed something was edited out of truth? Let us know, was it just damage control or deliberate distortion? Because in the end, maybe the loudest action isn't on screen. It's what's been silently replaced behind it.